Hey guys, James Wilson Taylor here for Roxanne. It's another of our video calls. We are catching up with everybody while we're all at home at the minute, and I'm delighted to say Laura Jane Grace is on the line. How are you, Laura?
Doing good.
Good to see you. Thanks for being here. And we will start this off in the way we've started off all of these, which is just to say, I hope you and your loved ones, you're keeping safe and well in this rather odd year we've all been having. We'll come on to what you've been working on in that time, but just generally, how have you been occupying your time over these last few months?
I've been trying to stay busy as possible. In addition to recording and releasing a record, I made a zine, like an old school, typed it out on a typewriter, cut it up with an X-Acto knife, glued it all together and made photocopies myself, type of zine, mailed it out myself. I've been doing a lot of running. I've been drinking a lot of espressos. And I soundproofed a room in the back of my apartment so that I can make home recordings and demos and stuff like that. I literally put in a hardwood floor and built like a cedar closet, soundproofed enclosure, painted the walls black. And then other than that, hanging out with my daughter and just trying to stay alive, you know?
Yeah, like we all are. I hadn't realized you'd actually gone full DIY with the studio. That's awesome. I was going to ask you, what are the challenges of recording from home? But there's the biggest one. You literally built yourself a studio. How do you begin with that? Was there a lot of Googling for soundproofing, or did you have a bit of knowledge there ready to go with this?
I had some experience because we tried to do certain things in the past with Against Me. To success or failure. So I had a good starting point, but never in an apartment setting. So there was a definite learning curve. But I started with, you get this stuff called mass loaded vinyl, which is just sheets of vinyl that you roll out onto the floor. So I put a layer of that down. I put that all over the walls. And then on top of that, I put the hardwood flooring, and then built a cedar enclosure inside of the closet on top of the mass loaded vinyl just for soundproofing, and then got a sound deflection kit that I hung. I'd be back there doing the interview now, but my internet doesn't stretch back there. So I still got to work out the internet in the studio part, but it is functioning other than that. And it sounds pretty good too. And then in addition to that, I got this thing that's called the IsoVox, which is this portable vocal booth thing that is essentially a big box that you your head in and you sing inside of, and it does it kills all the deflections and you get a really clear vocal tone, and it sounds good, if maybe a little boxy, but it sounds good. But you feel like an idiot in it. So as long as you're by yourself, it's okay. But if anyone's watching, you're like, oh my God, what am I doing with my life?
Yeah, you can get away with the idiot stuff when it's your home studio. You're fine. You're away from other people. It's absolutely fine. Whatever working environment you want there, it's all good. And it sounds like, yeah, very, very productive. Let's talk about this record because it was a complete surprise to everyone, of course. It's called Stay Alive. And just an initial point from what I've read, it sounds like you had at least the beginnings of these songs kind of ready to go, or at least ideas for what this would become, but you couldn't sit on them. You need to get them out. Why did you decide that now was the time? You know what? I need to make sure I'm getting out these songs sooner rather than later.
Sure. All of these songs were written over the past 2 years. And I started out this year under the assumption that I'd be working on a new Against Me record this year, and we had, last year at the end of the year, we had started getting together in the studio at least once a week, or at least a week for every month, and had continued on to that as this year started. So we spent a week together in January, spent a week together in February, spent a week together in March, and then we headed out on a tour, got 3 days into the tour and had to cancel it, had to go home. And it became apparent that all plans were off. None of us live in the same city. None of us live in the same state. We can't get together in the same room and continue working on stuff. And so kind of having operated on that schedule for the last couple decades of it usually takes me 2 years to make a record. You write the songs, you practice the songs, you record the songs, then you put them out, and then you go on tour. But so it had been 2 years. The last record I did was in 2018, a record called Bot to Rot. And being hitting that mark of having songs ready. And I had more songs than this. Against Me had been working through a bunch of songs. It wasn't apparent what the record was, but Against Me wasn't necessarily ready regardless to record. We didn't know what we wanted to do. And I realized, especially now, then that it was like, okay, well, this is kind of indefinite. We don't know what's going to happen. You know, it could be a year, it could be 2 years before we're back in a room together. And at that point, like, are we really going to want to go back and be like, here's these songs that are from back then before the pandemic that we were working on. Let's just pick up where we left off. And I was like, no, you know, like these songs are going to go stale. Like, and so many of these songs, the ones that became the record, really felt like they were lining up with the moment. Like it felt like the emotions behind them were resonating, and it felt like that this was their time. The songs were done. Like they were ready to go for people to hear them. So I didn't want to sit on them. You know, I didn't want to waste them. I didn't want to not do anything, not to have anything to show for the year. So I chose to work instead.
Yeah, no, it absolutely makes sense. It's interesting you say about the resonance as well, because it is funny that, isn't it? Loads of people I've spoken to, particularly people who've been releasing music in these last few months, even if, like you say, they've been ready to go for a couple of years, maybe, suddenly this new kind of meaning, this time kind of changes the resonance. Did you find were there any changes you made to reflect the time more, or was it already there and it just kind of made you focus more in on that?
The only change I'll say that was made to reflect the time, and this specifically speaks to my process as a songwriter, is that like I always name songs last, and I usually struggle when it comes to naming the songs. And maybe if it came down to it, I would just never name songs. I only name them because other people need to know their names, and you need to list something on the back of a record. But so the song "Shelter in Place," like the second I heard that term, I was like, that's a song title. and the song that is called "Shelter in Place," I was like struggling for a title for it. I didn't know what to call it. So I was like, that's the title of that song. And it completed that song. And the second that song was completed, I knew, like, there it is. Like that, I think I got a record here. I'm ready to go.
Yeah, definitely a stamp and a marker of this particular time, that phrase, isn't it? That's always going to live there, right there. Speaking of the actual working on the record then, so you had Steven as the producer. I mean, legendary figure, obviously, worked on so many amazing records and stuff. What was that working experience like for you? And actually, I guess the process of working partly in a home studio and booking your own studio time and stuff in this weird time, like what were the working processes and the challenges of making an album in these past few months?
Well, it was just about adjusting my scope. You know, like originally when it was like talking about an Against Me record, we were like, part of our struggle was facing this question of like, well, where are we going to record? Who are we going to record with? You know, we've made the last couple of records with our friend Mark in Michigan at his studio, but having made a couple records there, it was like we felt like we needed to change, you know, but then it's like wide open and not knowing where to go, what direction to head in. You know, we were stumbling with that. Having things limited to like, okay, I can't make a record with the band. I can't make a record anywhere but Chicago. So if I'm making a record in Chicago, where do I want to record? Like it limited it down, limited it options. And so, you know, last time I was over there in the UK, I was on a tour with my friend Frank Iero, and Frank had just made a record with Steve. And you know, he had talked a lot about that experience when we were on tour together. So it was like fresh in my head, but also like I've been a longtime fan of Steve Albini, both for his, you know, work as a recording engineer, recording bands like the Pixies, PJ Harvey, Nirvana, my friends, the Screaming Females, like you name it, Frank, to his own recording output with his band Shellac, Big Black, whatever, you know, like I've been a fan. And then beyond like his work, even just like his personality and his philosophy and his approach to recording. And that being that, you know, he prides himself on being a recording engineer and not a producer, like a recording engineer, very like work ethic, working class ethic to approach to working in a studio. And so like I craved that kind of simplicity, like as specifically knowing too that he makes like analog recordings. And that was like another limitation of, you know, right now there is nothing but an expanse of time. And with Pro Tools and with recording in Pro Tools, like you can endlessly track recordings. You can do 50 vocal takes and then edit together the best like word from each take to make the best performance and have it be flawless, you know? But that like seemed excessive, like grotesquely excessive, considering what's happening in the world right now. And I thought that like the correct moral choice was to do something that was like very austere and very like, you know, like as quick as possible. Don't waste time in the studio. Don't waste money in the studio. like just practice and make something real too. That's like an actual document, like a photograph. Like, you know, there's so much like talk about fake news now and people questioning what's real. And like, you have things like the deep fakes coming up where like, it's apparent that within a couple of years, you'll be able to see any movie you want with anybody's face playing the lead role in it. That like, I just wanted to make something inarguably real. That was just like a testament of like, that's my ability right now. Like, that's the sound of me in a room with a guitar and there's nothing added to it. That's just what I could do. And I'm going to try my hardest and I'm going to practice as hard as I can. But beyond that, that's it. You know, like, it is what it is. So I knew with Steve, like, that those were his standards, kind of like that. If I wasn't going to be practiced, that he wasn't going to have any patience for it. If I didn't know what to do, he wasn't going to help me. So it would like just seemed like an obvious choice. And it's right down the street, you know, like I'd never made a record here in Chicago before. I wanted that experience. And I called up Electrical Audio and I was like, hey, are you all open? You know, like, are you taking bookings right now? Because for a while, everything was closed. And they're like, yeah, we'll be back open up in July. So I was like, all right, I want 4 days, and booked the time and went in myself and made a record.
Yeah, amazing. I mean, does that change how you are thinking about your schedule mentally as well? Like, I guess being able to be at home for the recording process, and that, even though it's this year, it's got to have a certain level of relaxation to it. I would imagine being able to, like you say, go down the street and get the work done, but still be able to come home every night. Like, does that change your working style at all? Does it feel more comfortable?
Yes, it does for sure change it. As far as comfortability, it was a lot of pressure just in that it's like, it was all me, you know, like literally, like it was just me and Steve in the studio. It felt like a movie, like as far as, you know, we both had face masks on the whole time. Like, and he's like, he wears like a jumpsuit when he's working, you know, and a hat like this. And so like, you know, it's just like, I'm looking at his eyes the whole time and that's all I saw the entire time. And I only took my mask off when I was tracking vocals. And so like the two of us alone in the studio, like during a pandemic, wearing face masks, making a record. And usually when you're making a record in a band setting, like you're able to kind of take breaks from the pressure being on you, you know, like you record your guitar part and then they'll move on to the singing, you know, or like it's not all on you for a second. You can take a break and the pressure will be on another band member. Or if there's a big decision that needs to be made, like the sequence or something, it's a discussion between the four of you, right? And this was like, it's all me. I got to make the decision. If no one else is going to make the decision for me. So there was like that extra added pressure there.
Yeah, no, absolutely. But came across well and seems like a real achievement. And speaking of it being at home and just on yourself and everything, I want to just briefly mention the visual element, because if you go stream this album on YouTube, just chilling in the bath, just chilling in the bath, taking it easy during these lockdown months. Where did that idea come from? And I have to ask, just for all the nerds out there who watch all these videos and want all the details, what book are you reading in that bath?
Well, I'm reading a book called Vampires in the Lemon Grove.
Okay.
And it's a collection of short stories that I highly recommend. Really, really great. But, you know, again, it's like, I want to make a record that's about working within your limitations. So when it came to the question of like, well, what can we do for when talking it out with the label of like, what can we do for a visual to go along with this stream when we release the record? You know, I can't bring a camera crew here because it's not safe. So like, I have to film something myself. What can I film myself? What is an honest representation of this time? And like, other than, you know, working on songs, other than going running, and that was discussed. It was actually like brought up, the label's like, all right, what we're going to do is we're going to chase you with the drone. And I was like, wait, what? But so
just jogging through Chicago as a drone comes down on you.
100%. I swear to God, this is an actual conversation. All right. Where they were like, we're going to chase you with the drone. You're going to run from the drone. It's going to be terrifying. But that proved to be like too complicated to make happen either. So I was like, all right, well, you know, I live from my bath every night, you know, like I have like collection of bath bombs, bubble baths, stuff like that to like relax me, make me feel good, calm me down from the anxiety. So I thought that'd be funny, you know, like just like a long shot of like taking a bath.
Oh, I mean, in terms of if this is a lockdown record, if we look at any part of it as a lockdown record, that's the perfect visual element right there. Like, yep, go chill, have a bath, read a nice book, put the record on. That's the way to do it, I think. So as we said, you had intended originally that this was going to be at least the beginnings of an Against Me record. In terms of what's next and whenever that may be, do you have more songs kind of earmarked for what might work for the band next? Do you have other songs, or are you starting again from scratch to make something new for them?
Well, again, like there was a batch of like 30 plus songs that we had been working on at the time. And those were all in kind of different stages where like some of them we have recordings of, and others needed a lot of work. But it's, I can't imagine that when this is over and we are finally able to get back together again, that it'll seem exciting to just pick up right where we left off. I think I want to start fresh. And with that being said, part of wanting to get a record out now was feeling like I got to get this out of my system a little bit. I need to get some songs out so that I'll have room to write more songs. So, I can't head out on tour right now. So other than doing press, it's like, all right, time to start working on a new record. So I just plan on keeping on writing, and hopefully eventually, things will change and can continue working as a band, or we'll see what happens next, but yeah, it's all unpredictable. But that being said too, with these songs, and that was my approach in wanting to do really stark versions of them that are just me, where it's there's no reason why we can't play these songs live as a full band. There's no rules when it comes to that stuff. There's no reason why we can't eventually as a band do recordings of these songs together to see what that sounds like. I really believe that songs should be living things, and they should be able to live, change and grow over time if it feels relevant, and if it's not forced, why not,
Yeah, absolutely. And that links up very nicely to something. I know you got to go shortly, but something I definitely wanted to ask you about in that vein. We're all missing live music right now. Of course we are. We hope it comes back sooner rather than later. But one of the many tours you did of late, I suppose, you did that tour last year with the band where you were revisiting loads of old records and loads of old songs and playing them in full over a couple of nights. I just wonder, whenever a band does something like that, revisiting those old songs, it must influence how you're going to move forward. Did you discover any things going back that you hadn't noticed before? Did you make any changes in those? I just wonder, looking back at the beginning of those career, how was that pushed into what's next for you and next for the band?
Well, I think a lot of that, the discovery was rediscovering how to play old songs.
Right, sure.
Yeah, wait, what were we doing here? And relearning stuff. It was crazy how challenging that was in some instances. And I think a lot of that was because so much of being a band when we were younger was really about capturing a moment, and it was about just a spontaneous expression as opposed to a planned expression. But it's funny how with what's happened now with the pandemic, how much more meaningful those shows then seem of for the past 20 years, it's been this cycle of you put out a record, you go on tour for a year, 2 years, and you do it again. And each time you go on tour, it's a month long, and you have this set of adventures, and you come back from the tour, and maybe you've got a week or 2 weeks in between, and you think about what happened and where you've been, and you try to digest it, but there's not much time because you got to get going again. And this is the first time there's been an extended period of time to really look back of oh wow, that's 20 years of touring, that's 20 years of being a band, that's all these records, all these experiences. And inevitably this is a shared experience between all of us right now of there will be a before the pandemic and there will be an after the pandemic, and there are only so many experiences like that in life that you have. There's getting married, there's before you were married and there's after you were married. There's having a kid, before you had a kid and after you had a kid. But it's a definitive defining moment, a bookmark in your life, a chapter, And so to have ended, to not even know what was coming, but to have ended that chapter with going back and revisiting all those records and playing through them just feels that much more meaningful, and that there was some kind of subconscious psychic thing happening there.
Yeah, weirdly, I guess it is now the end of a chapter in a way. And I guess you're kind of proving that now, being able to go and record this record and just put it straight out. This is going to be potentially a new normal, to use that phrase we all hate now. But you know what I mean? It is really going to be a new way of working moving forward, I would imagine.
Well, you have to adapt. You have to figure it out. And I mean, like, I hate to like work in the album title and everything, but like that's staying alive. You know, you got to keep it alive, keep your creativity alive. And the way you keep creativity alive is by being fucking creative, you know, like, so figure it out. If the things you care about, like if you care about music, if you care about art, you know, like fight for those things. And the way you fight for those things is by creating, by doing new things, figuring out how to ways to work with in your confines. And you aren't the first artist that is like faced problems like this. You have to realize that, like, you know, artists worked through World War II, through World War I, through times before that were much harder than things we are facing now even. So like keep a perspective on that and just like work hard, you know, and keep fighting.
Yeah, no, very, very wise words. Absolutely. I think one that a lot of artists out there will appreciate and will definitely empathize with right now. Laura, it's really nice to chat to you. Congratulations on the record. And we look forward to, whenever it's allowed, you be back here in the UK doing some shows and all that good stuff in the future. But in the meantime, all the best to you, all the best to your loved ones, and we'll catch up with you soon.
Thank you very much. It's great talking.
Thanks so much. All right, Laura.